Hi, welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Thanks, Asher. It's great to be here. Thank
Um,
you for inviting me.
you're very welcome. Just to introduce you to the audience. Well, before I do that, you asked me what happened to my hand, and probably by
Yes.
the time someone sees this, it should be long healed and back to restored. But last Saturday, after recording the last podcast, I was like, let me go outside, enjoy the weather, take it in, like go for a bike ride. I got this bike ride a while ago and finally found a trail. So I went for a ride, rode around 7 miles, maybe the most I ever ridden. And then I went to the other side, kind of at the end of the 7 miles. And I was like, oh, this is where the trails are. Mind you, they're walking trails and maybe running trails, but I quickly found out that they're not exactly meant for bikes unless you know what you're doing. Because as I was riding,
No.
I found a tree root and the tree roots found me. And next thing I know, I'm up
Oh,
over my bike trying to figure out where to land. And once I landed, I was like, oh crap, oh crap. And then I just kept telling myself, get up, get up, get up, get up. And like
right.
getting up, trying to walk it off, be like, okay, like move your hand, don't let anything
Yeah.
kind of sit. But I could feel that something was wrong, couldn't put pressure on my bike. And just as I was going, I was just trying to, I got up, got a hand on my bike and just started walking it back. It was maybe 2 miles of
Oof.
walking, but I was like, just keep your head up, breathe. If you got to put your head down, just there's nothing
Right.
wrong. Like you, like things happen,
Right.
figure it out, like go home, get cleaned up. And for me, it's weird because I was telling you earlier about like, it's been 10 years since I've graduated. And I remember
Right.
going towards my graduation, I had something similar happen to my, not on a bike, but a similar injury on my right arm. And I was getting
Oh,
ready
wow.
for my engineering test, which was okay,
Oh,
this injury happened, I think Tuesday or Wednesday. Engineering test is Saturday, and we're having review
oh,
sessions during the week. So it's like I've got to rush back, have ice on it as I'm riding, go see the
right.
doctor, and get it looked at. Thankfully, then it's just a radial fracture. And again, this time went to the urgent care radial fracture, and I was like, oh, this
Oh,
this is something that will heal. But like as they followed up with me, it's like, okay, get a CT scan. That's different from the
right.
last time, but I'm like, I can still move my hands. It's not as
Right.
terrible as I think, but it's just something I'm going to have to go through. And just
Right.
being able to continue to work, I was able to do that this week. And just also having somebody and just having a great crew to work with me to do this or do that. And I could lay things out as best as possible and just help them maneuver it,
Sure.
like played water boy and different
Right.
things like that.
Right.
But that's the long story of what happened to my hand.
That's awesome. Okay. I mean, it's awesome telling the story. It's not awesome what happened to your hand, obviously. So I hope you're okay.
Yeah, yeah. I'm good. And even throughout the as it was happening, I was like, okay, it happened, leave it here, move on. Like you've had a great day up to this point. This is just a moment. And that's kind of goes back to the shifting or the renewing of my mind that I've taken on as like okay, this is how I'm going to live differently. This is the
Right.
process of like, okay, lessons I've learned from podcasting, lessons I've learned from therapy, lessons I've learned from just being around other people and seeing like you don't always get your own way, but you get to
Right.
choose how you react and respond. And like
Right.
everybody's like, oh, I'm sorry for your arm. And I'm like, it's not that bad. It's like it didn't poke through the skin. It's just in
Right.
place. They put a splint on it and everything's taken care of. I can breathe.
Right.
I can move around. There wasn't any blood. There wasn't any scarring. Just like internal
Right.
bruising, maybe. But like, it's okay. Don't feel bad for me. I'll be all right.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad you're all right.
But I guess that's a long soliloquy for people that are familiar. But for anyone that doesn't know, who do you say you are?
Wow. Who do I say I am? I mean, well, first I'll start that I'm Chris Cortese. I'm a husband, father. Boy, I live here. I've lived in northern New Jersey basically my whole life. Um, the lucky husband to my wife Dawn, and father to my three boys, Nick, Tim, and Joe. So I don't. I just consider myself another guy. Let me tell you that way. Who gets up to do the things he needs to do every day for his family and life and be social and friends and do his job to the best of his ability. And that's kind of, I mean, I'm not trying to downplay it. I never thought about it in those terms. Let me put it
Gotcha,
to you that
gotcha.
way.
Well, I did kind of give you a hard pivot there. I apologize.
Okay.
I should have maybe slow played it a little bit, but
No, it's
but
good.
just as you described yourself, I think that's perfect because you're the person that I appreciate meeting and I enjoy speaking to because it's that like you play the role that you play. Maybe you don't think too much of it. You don't need flowers brought to you to be like, hey, good job, dad. Like,
No,
good job showing up,
right.
going, doing your job, and this, that, and the other. But it's like you have the drive to just do it. And even when you don't have the drive per se, it's like you still do that. So that's
Of
why I
course.
wanted to have a conversation with you and introduce each other and get to know each other. Just have a conversation.
Well, and I'm appreciative, and I thank you. This is great. And to your point, the way you just said it, that's how I see myself. Think I don't consider myself to be special in
Mm,
doing those things that I do. I do what I'm supposed to do. I
right,
do
right.
and it's not that I just what I'm supposed to do. It's also what I love. I love my wife. I love my kids. That whole thing. So,
Mm. I like it. And have you always been in the New Jersey area?
yep, yeah. I mean, went to college in Ohio for 4 years,
Mm,
and for a very short window of time, my first job took me to Southern California for 4 months. But outside of that, it's been here in northern New Jersey, just
mm,
outside of New York City.
got you. And how'd you meet your wife?
We met at a bar. I like to tell people, she was this lonely person in the corner, and I said, there's a charity case, but that is about the exact opposite, to be honest. We met at a bar, a mutual acquaintance, someone I hadn't seen in a couple of years. I went to talk to.
Mhm.
He was talking to her. But after a couple of weeks, we would see each other at the bar and got to talking, and 33 years later, here we are. So
Wow.
it's yeah.
A lot of talks happen in between those years, huh?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, we talked for a while. The first time I asked her for her number, she said no. uh and then, like
Classic.
an idiot, the next week I said, I'm going to embarrass myself again. And but this time she gave me her number, and we went out on a date. And you know 4 years later, we were married, and here we are, a total
Yeah.
of 33 years. If 20, they'll be 29 married in November.
Mm,
So yeah.
I like it. I
Yeah.
it's funny because like how you describe it, that's a good ideal process because it's like it doesn't need to take a long time to like once you're engaged in that direction to say, okay, hey, like let's try and figure this thing out. Because sometimes
Right.
if you drag your feet too long, like 4 years can become 7 years and it's like 15
Right.
years and that people might start looking and being like, wait, what are you guys doing over there? Are you guys shacking up or like is this thing going
Right.
anywhere? Like put this down on papers.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's, I think things are different today than they were 33 years ago. But,
Mhm.
it was, you know, it's- and I try to tell my boys as well, you don't want to go looking for it.
Mm.
When you start looking for something and it becomes like something you're going after, that you usually don't find it, or you make a bad decision.
Yeah.
It'll find you at the right time. And that's what it was. I wasn't looking for anything at the time. I wasn't, um, and you just find the right person, whether it's divine intervention or
Mhm.
serendipity, whatever you want to call it. But,
Yeah.
things work out.
Nice. And I guess maybe take me back to how you grew up. Like how are things for you and like how'd you decide to go in the direction that you did, like where you live and like work wise or just things that you like to do casually?
Sure. So growing up, right? So I was born in 1967, Asher. I'm a very old man. So I'm a child of the 70s and 80s.
Mm.
Growing up, Italian family, very tight knit. My mother and father built a house right
Mhm.
next door to my mother's sister, so my aunt and uncle and their kids. Um, and very tight knit, always together every Sunday at our grandparents' house or at one of the aunts and uncles' house. Um, I would say it was a regular childhood upbringing, close with family,
Mhm.
doing all the things a kid does. My dad was a teacher. My mom stayed at home. Um, I was a sports nut, still a sports nut. I wasn't necessarily very good at it, but I was a sports nut. Um, and I went to high school. Um, and then I wanted to play soccer in college, and I found a small Division III school in Ohio that wanted me to go play there, and I was ecstatic to go there and go grow up, away at college where I was 8 hours away from home, which my mother was beside herself. But a good Italian mother, that's what they do. They don't want their kids to go too far from home. But I went and I learned to live on my own, and made some great friends and had some great experiences. And then so to give you your part of your question was kind of what drove me to the direction I was going or whatever. So growing up next door to my cousins who were all older than me. So being the oldest of three boys in my family, um, my cousins next door were all older than me. So it was like having, three older brothers and an older sister. Um, and I saw, what they did going through high school and college and getting in the business world and seeing the way they went, and they all kind of majored in business of some sort. And that kind of inspired me. Especially my oldest cousin next door, he would come home and at the time it was like a Datsun 280Z, and I was like, oh, look at him, and count, and it kind of spurred me that I said I wanted to do those things. And so I went to college thinking that was what I wanted to do as an accountant, and I realized hard and fast rules are not necessarily for me.
Mhm.
And I switched to marketing. I
Mm.
liked that aspect of things.
Yeah.
Um, and then when I graduated, started interviewing and start realizing, the purest form of marketing is sales, and you get into sales and you start in sales. And that's kind of the evolution of how I got into what I do in sales.
Got you. That's awesome. And thank you for being patient with me as I was
All
maneuvering.
good.
I was trying to adjust this light, but you rolled right along with it, and
It's
nobody will
all
be the
good.
wiser.
It's all good.
But so growing up, like you mentioned, growing up in a tight knit family and just being able to see your cousins and see like what they were doing and kind of having those role models. And
Yeah.
I guess how many years in were you until you decided like, okay, this isn't gonna work. Like what they're doing isn't working for me
Two.
and I gotta find something else. Year
Yeah,
two?
it was 2 years. It's not that it wasn't working for me. I should, look, it was still business track, right? Which, my dad was a teacher. And my dad, I think as any parent, you want your kids to have better, right? Be better. And I think, my dad wanted us to go to college and major in business type things and maybe do that as opposed to what he was doing.
Gotcha.
Um, and so it was still a business track. I just, went from accounting to marketing, which, it was my oldest cousin who was the accounting major over there, right? The others
Mm.
weren't accounting, they were business majors. So I kind of seen it
Mm.
all, but it all kind of guided me, if you know what I mean.
Right, right. I
So,
see what you mean.
um,
Like you
and
were
again, being a tight knit family too, we were all always together, open conversations. Back in the 70s and 80s, people were a lot less guarded in what we conversed about. We just talked about everything,
yeah,
right? And so it didn't matter.
I think that's
And then you learn.
yeah, I think that's pretty cool. And
Yeah.
And like in that, so I guess it, like you said, initially the plan was to do business slash
Accounting,
accounting,
right?
but then you went the business track and that led you into marketing and then
Marketing. Yep.
sales. Got you.
Yep.
And then, so like, what would you say you learned in school that that you used as you worked, or like what was one of the memorable things that you enjoyed about like the switch that you made?
The reason, and this is right, you got to end up knowing who you are. I didn't necessarily know it at the time in this way, but
Mm,
different people have different abilities and different things. And I use my two brothers and I as an example, right? I
mm,
am a sales guy. I'm a relationship guy. I like talking. I like building relationships with people and fostering that in my accounts and my business relations, right? Because I
right.
still believe firmly to this day, people buy from people. They have to trust that you're going to have their back, right?
Mm,
My middle brother Mark is a graphic designer, right? He can do things. I have zero artistic ability. I mean, zero. I'm a stick figure guy, and he can
mhm,
draw and do things, but he couldn't do what I do,
mm,
right? I
right,
can't do
right.
what he does. My youngest brother, the engineer,
Mhm,
I mean, it's a lot of math and science, right? I could not do what he does. I
right,
can't, but he can't do what I do, right? It's one of those things. So you have to know what you are.
right.
And I didn't know it in that way 30 some odd years ago, but I knew as I was going through it and of course, when you're in a liberal arts school and you're taking you're majoring in accounting, you still have to take management and marketing.
Mm,
And I realized that I was having more enjoyment in those classes than the strict rules based, cost accounting. Like
right.
that was just, I was like, it's not doing it for me. Like,
Like you want to claw your eyes
so
out.
yeah, it wasn't doing it for me.
Yeah,
Kudos to those who can, right?
right,
Because you need those people,
right.
right? And um, so, so I made the change, and I don't regret it for a second. I think I made the right move, and I like what I do.
Mm, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I guess from that, like I I guess that had to inspire you on to actually want to do more and like finish and get your degree and things like that if you're actually enjoying what you're doing. Because to your
Yes.
point, it's that very few people go to college and have an understanding of like, oh, I want to do this. Like you have the people every now and then that are like, I always knew that I was gonna be this from the get-go. And I kind of look at those people sometimes and be like, I don't know if you're just like a very full of it and you just like got your story straight, but I'm like, good for you. Like
Right.
I'm not gonna be bitter about it. I'm like, good for you. Like at some point in time I'll figure it out what I'm trying to do and then it'll come together.
Right. Yeah. I can't sit there and say, oh, this is what I always knew I want. Right. I
Yeah.
mean, I find that, and maybe those people are that subset of the population that just has that ability to manifest something and be
Mhm.
and do it. It just wasn't me.
Right.
And nor do I can't say I know many people who necessarily fit that mold either, but I'm sure they're out there somewhere.
Yeah. So then so once you started, like what was the difference from what you were told work was gonna be like and then what work was actually like?
So you're talking post graduation.
Yes.
Okay. So first when you're marketing, right, you're not learning about sales. You're learning about how to market a product, how to deal with advertising, right?
Mhm.
And then when you start looking for a job, you realize it's not necessarily like there's a whole lot of that
Mm.
out there, with, especially for a young college, for a new college grad. Um, and you would, right back in the day, Asher, I was opening up the newspaper every day at the want ads to look for who was posting for jobs, right?
Right.
Um, and people would have something under marketing and you call them, you come to realize it's a sales job, right?
Mm.
So um, I got into it, and I will say the thing I liked about it the most is sales gets you out of an office. You're not
Mm.
stuck behind a desk every day.
Right.
You are out of the office. You're interacting with people, right?
Mhm.
You're on the road. You're out, obviously, if every day was a beautiful day, it'd be one thing, but you remember the beautiful days, right? You're out, it's sunny, I'm out. Like that's invigorating.
Right.
Rainy
Right.
days stink, right? Of course, but it was good to be out interacting with people.
Mm. I like that. And
So, yeah, you know, um, and it's evolved now, right?
mhm.
30 some odd years later now, it's evolved where, I'm in less of what we call a hunting role and more of I've kind of put myself in a position where my job is to kind of make sure some of our largest accounts stay happy and keep buying and renewing with us. I'm not out, making 100 cold calls a day trying to find a prospect, right?
Right.
I'm at a different level of my career, but it's enjoyable. I enjoy the relationships I have, the people I work with, and again, the ability to get out and meet people.
Yeah. It's it's neat how like
Yeah.
the characteristic that you described, like wanting to be around people, is I find that I like that also. Like going from I never like I've seen off have you seen Office Space?
Yes.
Okay, so like I I wouldn't have ever imagined of being in that environment would be until being an engineer, but like working like while I was in college, I worked at co-op, which was a semester on of work, a semester on of school, work, school
Right.
3 times alternated. And that was fun for me because again, you're out in the field, you're not doing like you might do a report like from time to time, but at least as a technician, you were out traveling from city to city, working on call and working with like a variety of people and just
Right.
having that exposure. Like I may not be like I've become someone that has made themselves be more open to people using things like Toastmasters and like learning how to get my words together, learning to pause and having your crutch words counted to where it's like when I say the one that I just did, I'm aware of it, but I don't have
Right.
the continual hang up. It's just that when I speak, I can better convey my point without this fear or this anxiety of like, I don't know if they like me. It's like you almost revert back to high school once you're like
Right.
older now. Like I'm 33 currently, and it's it's just cool to see the like small steps where it's that I thought I wanted to do sales, or at least I had an inkling of it when I started out engineering. And the first job I start reading like self-help books or just things that are developmental because the environment was a little negative, but I was trying to find positive things to fill the gaps. And it's like,
Right.
oh, sales is a great thing, but seeing that it's a different skill set, I'm like, I enjoy being around people, but maybe I don't know if I can sell you on a product or like convince you to say, hey, can you buy this? Like, or hey, you need
Right.
this. Like you're like the way you described it is like you're buying from the person, but
Correct.
maybe I'm doing it differently. But I like how you described it to where just that same interaction, like being out, not stuck to where it's that office space thing of like over
Right.
and over. And it's like, oh my
The
goodness.
monotony, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's funny you say that, and I have a two-pronged thought on this, one about being in an office, the other about sales. I'll start with the sales thing first.
Mhm.
When I started in the sales training, you get, again, this is 1989, right? You know, okay, you're going to meet someone, you're going to start here's the questions you want to ask, and you want to start building yes momentum. Build
Mm,
this yes momentum. Get them saying yes, simple questions. Basically, anybody's going to say yes. And then, you go through the process, and then, you have your order form, make sure you point the pen at the signature line. So,
mm,
that's not what sales is anymore, right? Sales is so evolved, and also the people we interact with in sales are also much more privy to what it is, and
Mm.
they're educated about it. So you have to be better and you have to be more professional. And I say now, I don't sell anyone on anything. Technically, my job is a sales job, but
Mhm.
my job is to work with my clients, right? To find out what is it that they're struggling with
Mhm.
that we can help with, right?
Yeah.
And we don't, and I don't, this is not just a talk track. This is honest because I think about it. People go, wow, they always love to use the line, the used car salesman, right? And
Mhm.
I'm like, that's, that's such an old, outdated ideology, right?
Mhm.
Uh, It's not how it works anymore, right? People are, and especially in corporate America and in what I'm doing,
Mhm.
it, you're building a relationship. You're there to help the client on the other end of the line of who you're talking to, because these decisions are big money decisions that impact people's jobs and so on. So it, it's it's evolved
Right.
tremendously. Um, so to that end, it's just a total change.
Mhm.
Um, and then on the flip side, the whole thing you're talking about being in an office, like office space, I will say, um, there's also part of me that longs for being back in those days when you got up, you went to your office, and you also had your office relationships. And I'll
Mhm.
relate this to my oldest son. My oldest son's 25.
Mhm.
Um, so in fact, all three of my kids were 2020 graduates, right? I had a middle school, a high school, and a college graduation in 2020,
Wow.
which was COVID,
Mhm.
right? So, you know, my my youngest son, it was a virtual middle school graduation. My middle son, they did a virtual one, and then as it got a little later in the summer, they allowed us to do a socially distanced graduation at the high school. And
Mhm.
then my oldest, they didn't even allow. He ended up doing like a walkthrough graduation in like October that the parents weren't even invited to. But he's been working ever since for a company for 3 years, and it's been remote.
Mhm.
And I talked to him. I say, "You don't realize what you're missing." I said, "Because you never had it." I said, "But when I was your age, I was going to an office every day. Yes, I
Mhm.
would go out on the road, but maybe you go get coffee together with somebody before you got on the road. You're
Yeah.
building relationships with the other salespeople around you or the other people who do your job. Maybe it's because he's not in sales, right?
Mhm.
Maybe it's the other people you commiserate about your job with. You talk about things you deal with. The things we grew up with. We would come back at the end of the day of our sales jobs and we would tell our war stories about
Mhm.
people we met or the funny stories, right? And you're building a camaraderie and friends. And work is more than just sitting at a computer, right, all
Right.
day. And I feel bad for some of these kids. Now, some of them are starting to get back in offices, and I know my son would like to do that, but um, to me, I feel bad for that because people miss the office experience. There's so much more to it
Yeah.
than just
Yeah.
going to work,
Most
right? You go to
definitely.
lunch with someone, at the happy hour. I was 22, 23, going to happy hours a couple of nights a week, having a great time. Like it's a different animal, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean, and it the thing that I like about what I do now, or I've been able to do, is that like even when working in an office, I think it was short term, but we looked forward to going out to lunch, or like, hey, let's do something together because we went through this training program, and a lot of the people on the training programs would be at the office for like 3 to 6 months. So, okay, this person's only here for a short time, so they're gonna get shipped out here, here, and there. Like, people would trade stories similarly. And also, it's let's spend time together because you have a limited time, so you're more inclined to actually go out. Like, I
Yep.
went to Springfield. I was like, oh, this is where like Lincoln City, popular president. Like, let me go see
Yeah.
that. And like, just asking people, and like, of course, you get in a friends group where it's like you have so many options, it's easy for people to be flaky. And then I told myself, it's like, okay, I don't want to be flaky, so I did a drive around Lake Michigan before leaving there to
Nice.
come here. And then I went with a buddy to I think up in Wisconsin they have a Six Flags there, and
Yep.
we went to Six Flags, went to the like the palace place where they do like nights, and they feed you like they feed you to where like you eat with your hands. It's like a chicken, something else, and something like
Right.
that. Medieval times, that's what it's called.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
That's
yeah,
medieval times. Yep.
yeah. So it's like just doing those things and having those experience in those moments. It was neat to like appreciate it. And now when I am able to be in the field, it's like, okay, like I've been in the office too long, writing report after report after report. But then it's, oh yeah, you can just like for us, it's a little different where you can yell across the hall to someone, or you can yell to the other person. And it's like they
Right.
talk back to you, and I'm like, oh yeah, I did miss this. And just
Yeah.
being that sense of like, okay, I work with people that I enjoy. Everyone can have their good days and bad days, but
Right.
like at the end of the day, we're working on similar projects. We're working towards a goal. And when we win, like we're excited, we get more work and we get to improve our community and like improve other places in the state of Georgia. And I think that's pretty neat.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it has an impact, right?
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you. And so like when did the like when you had to make the switch from where sales was like um process or formulaic where it's like okay you do this you do this you do this and then people start to catch on and technology becomes more of a thing like I was literally born the year after you were starting your career in
Right.
1990 and the thing for me it's like I immigrated to the states in to the US in 97 and
Where'd you
we
immigrate from?
from Cameroon, West Central
Okay.
Africa. Yeah.
Awesome.
And the thing it was like, okay, first thing was you need to learn English. So do some of the ESOL classes, cut back speaking French at home so that we can practice more and more English. And
Sure.
the like I think at that time, at least for me, it was like introduction of like broader internet and now it's like okay hey these things are there you have internet cafes at the mall and I'm sure other people maybe had other things but it was interesting to see like you have an opportunity to see hand me down things but then things that are also popular like within a few years the iPhones and things like that are coming out and then
Right.
like Facebooks and YouTubes are being launched I'm curious like for you was it an easy transition since like you'd say like you're because I also remember looking in a newspaper and seeing that going through high school because I graduated 2008 and it's like we get a
Right.
newspaper but by the time I'm in college obviously like to
Right.
like 2010s and things like that is starting to transition over to digital people are having writer strikes and everyone's
Right.
worried about like okay now do we go to a subscription model or this like I say all that to say was it an easy pivot for you to be like okay well this doesn't work anymore now we do this thing.
So it's just about embracing change from time to time, right? I mean,
Mhm,
I look at it and I go back and I think about sales jobs I had, where I would come in and basically, they provided you a desk and a phone
mhm.
and a list of accounts
Yeah,
and a pencil or a pen and a pad. And that's what you did.
yeah,
And you had to cold call and um, and you get used to that and you think, okay, well, you don't know any better, right?
mhm,
That's what we had at the time. And then over time, all of a sudden, especially at this one company I was at for like
mhm,
9 years, then all of a sudden laptops come out. You're
mhm,
dealing with laptops because laptops would be easy because you want to make a presentation or a proposal instead of having an administrative assistant, right,
mhm,
who you would send your notes to or whatever, right, to type it up.
mhm,
Um, now, you have a laptop, you can do some of that work on your own and you can send it to a printer and it it changes things.
mhm,
So I would say it's been a matter of adaptation. I like to believe when it comes to technology and things like that, I'm a fairly open person. I wouldn't
Mhm.
say I'm a bleeding edge technology guy,
Yeah.
but I don't run away from technology. I like I like new bells and whistles. I do.
Mhm. Gotcha. Right.
Um,
But you don't
but
want to be like a first adopter, like, oh yeah, like put me on
right,
the front
first
line.
adopter was the word. Thank you. I was saying bleeding edge, and I couldn't come up with first
Gotcha.
adopter was
No,
it.
you're good. You're good.
Um, so I like it. I like bells and whistles. Like way back, 2000, 2002 maybe, 2002, 2003. I had a job in like, um, was it an iPack? It was a personal. It was a phone, but it was like it was more. It had a little stylus, and like
Oh, like
I went out on a
the
limb.
BlackBerry or the
It was
no,
before. It was
it was
before BlackBerry was a big thing. It was.
oh wow.
I want to say I don't know if it was an iPack or if it was like a Samsung, but it was like a pocket computer. It's like a pocket PC. It was a
Mm,
pocket PC,
yeah.
and and then I went and I bought the GPS add-on for it where you and connected it, and then you had
Mhm.
to put the thing on the dash of your car so you could and like it to me, technology, you look for things that can help, especially in sales, right? Sales
Yeah.
is you have a quota, you got to make your number. How do
Mhm.
you get there? You want to find the tools that will help make your job easier um, to do that. So, um, I mean, do you have hiccups from time to time where you're like, that's ridiculous. Why would I use that? And then,
Mhm.
6 months later, you're like, oh my God, why wouldn't I use that? So it's just a matter of adapting to change. And they always, people say, change is a very hard thing for people to do. When you're so used to doing something one way,
Yeah.
someone asks you to change it, your first reaction is usually going to be no,
Right.
unless you've had such a problem with what you're doing. But usually, if you're doing something one way, the same way all the time, you think you have it figured out.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
someone comes along and tries to tell you, I got a better way. And your first reaction might be, no, you're full of it.
Yeah.
So to me, it was all just about, I've always been fairly open to change in technology in that regard. So,
Gotcha. Yeah. I think for me, I've had the knee jerk reaction of just being like, no, just to be like, okay, I get to have a voice, and then I can be like, okay,
right,
like I can take my no back and be like, oh well, okay, let me see what you got there. Let me try it out. Because I remember having an argument with a good friend of mine in college, and we were going over like a homework assignment, and I'm sure we were saying the same thing, and I just yelled out like, "No!" Like, and it's like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "No, you're right, but I just wanted to say no." And it's like everybody's talking, and I just wanted to get a word in.
right, right. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, but the when you mentioned change, I think something that actually opened up my mind about that coming from the no, 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 because I'm like, oh, I'm easily influenced to where if somebody was trying to sell me something at the mall, it's like, oh, hey, sir, come look at this thing. And it's like, oh, well, of course, I need to oblige the person. Like,
Right,
I don't want to be rude. Like, I want to be nice. But a book that actually got me going down the Audible path and like reading the self-help books or just like personal development books was Who Moved My Cheese, because
oh,
it
okay.
it was such a strange title. I was like, huh, they make books like that? And then when I saw the book, or I listened to it, and I was like, oh, it's only an hour. The story's only like 15 minutes. I'm like, wait, people write short books. They're not all textbooks. They're not all like
Right,
just draining things where you don't like you have to like labor over it and just be like, "Oh my goodness, are my eyeballs about to
right,
fall out?" It's like, no, someone actually took 15 years to like write a condensive story with characters and things that a child can hear, but also an adult can hear and be like, "Oh, here like the breadcrumbs and the list, then the lessons," and
right,
just like the whole the whole theme being like change is inevitable, and it's
right.
like the sooner you embrace it, the better off you are to like go in the right direction. And like as they say, it's you got to run through the maze to find your cheese. But
Right,
if the cheese
right.
runs out, like you can't stay stuck there and be thinking, well, somebody's got to put back the cheese. If like whoever did it, they got to put it back. They got to put it back. And it's like
Right.
they whoever they is may not acquiesce to the demands. And it's sometimes you
Correct.
just got to get up and get going.
Absolutely. That's 100% right. No doubt
Yeah.
about it.
So as we're kind of wrapping up the year, like what's 2023 been like for you? I know we kind of jumped all over the place, but like what have been some of the things that you've been enjoying this year or looking forward to?
Um, it's been, I mean, overall a good year.
Mhm.
It's hard, right? My youngest son is going to be a senior in high school, which means we're going to be done with high school, right?
Wow.
With my wife and I, our kids are going to be all done, and my middle should graduate college this coming year, and then I'll have
Mhm.
another one in college, and it's you start as much as you kind of know you're aging,
Mhm.
you start really hitting like, holy cow, like like this year, my company they offered an early retirement option
Mhm.
for people. Now I've only been here 12 years, but technically, when you take my age
Mhm.
plus my years, I qualified and I got the package. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't take it. I still have at least I got to work at least 10 more years,
Mhm.
maybe a little longer because I got 5 more years of college,
Mhm.
and then I'd like to put at least 5 or 6 years of money away after college. Um, but you start realizing your age, I guess, and come to grips with some of this stuff. It's
Mhm.
hard, because raising your kids is like one of the greatest joys of your life. It's and then you realize that you know you got my oldest who's 25. I mean, who knows? He could be married soon and having kids. Who knows,
Mhm.
right? I mean, and then you start talking about being a grandparent. And the hard part is in my head, when I'm not looking in a mirror in my head, I'm still 25, 26,
Mhm.
27. And then I look in the mirror and I go, who's that guy? Um, when did I get that old? But so 2023 has been some of that coming to grips with that reality.
Mhm.
Um, but it's also, but it's a lot of good. I mean, we're together as a family. Things are good, knock on wood. We figured it out for the first time in 10 years. We were able to all five of us go away on a vacation,
Oh,
right?
nice.
Just because between college
Mhm.
and then prior to that, when your kids are involved in sports, it's
Mhm.
hard to, oh, you can't go on vacation in season, whatever,
Right,
right?
right.
We just hadn't been able to coordinate all five of us. So, it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. We went away to Punta Cana, Dominican Republic, for 5 days, which was great. It was just
Nice.
like it was weird. We were all out of the house together, right? Because ever since the pandemic,
Yeah.
a lot of it is in the house.
Mhm.
And we had a great time. It was a good vacation for our family, a good getaway, and just kind of relax.
Yeah.
So it's been good, and we actually the week before I went on vacation, my company had our first get together in 3 years
Wow.
internally, which we would do it every year prior to the
Mhm.
pandemic. You would be together every year, and we were all just so happy to be back in a room together. People we see all the time, do things with. It was just great to be together. So I would say that was also good. Kind of
Yeah.
getting those connections back going was great.
That's awesome. I like in appreciating what you're sharing, it reminds me of something you said earlier that you don't get something by seeking it out. Like sometimes it finds you. So it's like
Right.
being like thinking, "Oh, okay, I'm this old. I don't have a family, or I don't know if I want a family." And it's like, should I like start doing everything that Chris is doing? Or like I joined a men's prayer line back in
Nice.
2017, I think. And just like being a part of that is something that encouraged me to look at things differently, and also actually develop a healthy relationship with other men, and to be like, oh, okay, like it's good to actually have like a brotherhood, or like a tribe, or
Yes,
just like guys that you can talk with, where it's not just prayer, or it's not just religious, but it's expanded outside of that, and actually being able to
sure.
connect with someone who within, like the first person that I interview and that I chat with frequently is my buddy Theo. And I met him
Hmm.
through that, through the prayer line, and
Awesome.
through a retreat that we had. And it was just like, okay, like initially, like I had a lot of comparison that I was doing, but I've since learned like the less I do that and the more I appreciate myself. To your point, it's like that's possible. Like when you say like you're able to wrangle like three adult guys at this point in this year, not years ago when they were young and everybody was at the house when things are convenient pre-pandemic, but like no, presently, like you're able
Yeah.
to do that, and like everyone's schedules worked out and all, and it's like, wow, that's neat. And I can be happy for you without like having envy attached to it, without being like, when is it going to be my turn to be like, oh no, like this is this is good. Like you were able to enjoy something, and I can appreciate that for you, to be like good on you, good for your family, and
Right.
like that's just great. Like I don't need to add anything more to it. I just wanted to point to that and be like, as I'm like, you taught me something within
Oh,
our
thank you.
conversation today, and it's like, okay, like you're right, because more things that I've been able to get, I've spent less time chasing them. Like the things that have run away from me, it's like chase, 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 chase. It's like
Right.
this isn't gonna work out. And it's like even cleaning my room, it wasn't a thing of like, you gotta do this, you gotta do this, you gotta do this, like just demanding, demanding, demanding. And a friend of mine had said, you can you're you're your own boss and your own employee, but the thing that you have to recognize is that the part of you that's a boss doesn't, you don't want to become a tyrant to yourself, to where you're not a good employee and you're just like, okay, you're lazy. If you want to be an entrepreneur where like you have to work for everybody even though you think you're working for yourself, it's like, if you're not a good employer of yourself, it's not going to work out, because then you can burn yourself out. You don't have vacation or downtime or things
Right.
built in to be like, okay, we do this, we get a reward. Like this is accomplished, like we celebrate it. It's not just
Yeah.
work, 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 grind, grind, grind until everything's just like you're like dust in like the mortar and pestle, whether you're making my mom uses it to like grind up peppers or different
Yeah.
spices like that to put in the food. So that imagery always comes up to me, and I'm like, yeah, maybe today's not a grind day. Today's a
Right.
relax, chill, and just enjoy day.
You have to have those moments of that. And to your point, when you talk about, because what I had said earlier specifically about, um, I think it was around dating, like it'll
Mhm.
find you. You can't
Right,
go
right.
looking for it. Like it's also there's the law of attraction, right?
Mhm.
The more you're comfortable with yourself
Yeah.
and confident in yourself and don't act like you're needy,
Mhm.
people will be drawn to that,
Yeah,
right? People who are needy repel people. they,
yeah,
people do things for those people out of obligation, like, oh,
yeah,
right? It's
yeah.
sad but true. I'm not putting those people down.
No,
It's
I
the
laugh
laws of
because
attraction.
I identify myself in that, because I'm like, I've been there. I've been there before. And it's like, I don't think I'm there as much.
Right. And I would tell you, just like I tell my own kids, it be who you are, and it'll
Mhm.
find you, and what's right for you will find you. So,
Yeah.
uh, it's all about belief in yourself, right?
Mm.
And in fact, I have this thing. I think my wife had given it to me for a Father's Day or something. It was a saying that said, "My hold on, I want to make sure I read it right.
Gotcha.
Dad gave me the greatest gift. He believed in me, right? And I
Mm,
go back to like my dad, right?
mhm,
And I think my dad, he believed in his boys, right?
mm,
He believed in his wife, right?
mhm,
He believed in them. And I want my boys to always know, like, you should never doubt yourself. I believe in you. You
mhm.
need to believe in you. And it's the same thing. If you don't believe in yourself, no one's going to.
Yeah.
So you be a good person, do your job, right? Don't take advantage of anyone else, right? Just do the
Mhm,
right things that you were raised to do. And and as I said, it's like that law of attraction. If you're doing those things,
mhm.
you're going to attract the right people.
Yeah. That yeah, I agree with you. And another thing that I like that like you can't really forget it, like the pandemic specifically, and just seeing like, okay, this was a time that things shifted, and like for better or worse, it's like for me, it seemed like I was able to hibernate a bit, but
Sure.
in coming out of it, it's like, oh yeah, I did take a break from engineering, and it's like there was a time where I wasn't interacting with people to where when you actually got out and you're like, oh okay, like hey, how are you doing? It's like you're you're just being rescued, and people are like, hey,
Yeah.
like from a distance, and then slowly building back up. And maybe some people aren't able to enjoy what they once enjoyed, and maybe others like take pride in it as like, okay, like I'm not sociable anyway, so I just want to stay as far away from people as possible.
Right.
But it's regardless of where people fall in, it's good to acknowledge like, yeah, this happened, and like life has been different since then, but here's
Right.
new things that we get, and then here's things that may come back around. But again, it goes back to that thing of like, if you constantly keep going on about like the good old days, the good old days, the good old days, it's like you miss the good days now that are
Yep.
present.
Absolutely. And as you get older, sometimes it's harder to not think about the good old days.
Mhm,
Um, it's harder not to reminisce,
mhm,
but I also think you have to know and you have to focus on enjoying what's in front of you at the moment.
mhm.
Don't keep lamenting what you don't have. Don't keep focusing on what other people have, or what you have is what you have and it's good, and enjoy that. And it's being in the moment, I guess, is the best way to say it.
Mhm. I like it. Well,
Yeah.
let me not keep you too long, unless you have more for me. I was gonna say,
I,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, no, I've loved this conversation, and like I said, I'm so thankful you chose me to talk to me about this. Like I said, I don't consider myself that kind of a guy, but this has been excellent. I mean, and I love hearing your story,
Mhm.
and about you, and I think what you're doing is awesome, and I've enjoyed it, and I'm honored. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And it's something I say to everyone that says they're not that guy. I tell them you're exactly the person I'm trying to get, because everybody that's not that guy, they're the people that more people need to see or just be aware of. It's that if you feel like you're not that person, you're doing well enough to keep this world going and to continue inspiring, encouraging your family on the home base and your immediate community, because at the end of the day, I think that's what matters. And when it comes to social media, for instance, like you can filter out the bad, the ugly, and all that.
Right.
And you really, when you start looking for something different, you find beautiful gems like diamonds
Yep.
in the rough. And it's just like, oh yeah, that's why we enjoy this life. Like that's why we value the here and now. And it's not the ridiculousness or the this. Like, of course, a joke is great.
Right.
Like all the other things are wonderful to take in. But I think just thank you for having the conversation with me, because I always take it as a sign of trust, because it's like sometimes you meeting a complete stranger, you don't know what their intentions are. Are they going to bait me? Are they going to do this? But it's like just operating on that, the good faith. I think it's great, and it's a pleasure to meet you as well.
Same here, Asher. Thank you.
And I'll ask you this question. Maybe I've prepped it up a little bit better,
Go
but
ahead.
from the beginning, or just as our conversation has progressed, are you still who you said you were?
Am I still who I said I am? I think so. I don't think I've changed. I it's important. I always try to make sure I'm the same person.
Mhm.
I mean, obviously, we all change in certain things over time,
Right.
and especially when you learn. But as I'm trying to remember exactly what I said at the beginning of the podcast, um, but I do I do believe I'm the same.
Gotcha.
You know I, I'm different in this,
Mm,
and now I know Asher,
mm.
and I know you, and I've had a great conversation, and I've heard things from your vantage point, and I've learned about you. So I'm different in that way. I've met a new person who I enjoy talking to. So I'm different in that regard. Let's put it to you that way.
Awesome. I
And
like it.
that's a good thing. It's a
Yeah.
good different.
And there's no wrong answers, by the way. So
I know, no, I
right, right.
know.
No, I like asking the question sometimes, and even as we talked about, like, hey, what should we do, like prepping before? And I was like, no prep. Like,
No prep.
maybe if it's something like, if you want to talk about a specific topic, it's like, okay, like we'd like to highlight this. I'll I'm willing to try, but I kind of
Right,
like the, you're meeting someone. Imagine you're meeting someone off the street, and like people would do. Like I kind of grew up with,
yeah.
I've grown up with the era, and I've been around people that it's like, oh yeah, you can approach a stranger as an adult, like in a coffee
Right,
shop or somewhere casual, where it's like, oh hey, how are you? It's like, if somebody
right,
doesn't want to talk, like don't pester them. Leave
right.
them alone. If they said no, no means no. Just back away, mind
Well,
your own business. But like, you meet someone, I've met a couple of people, complete strangers, on a plane ride, and had wonderful conversations, learned things that I
right.
would have never known, and just like, oh wow, like people are approachable.
Oh yeah. And to your point, whether it's on a plane ride or somewhere you're on a line somewhere in the store, you right, you just strike up an ad hoc conversation about something.
Yeah.
But as before, I forget when you talk about, we talked. I had messaged you a couple times. What do you want to talk about? And you were like, no, no. You understand something too. As a sales guy, as
Yeah.
a sales guy, you don't go into meetings without knowing what the agenda is,
Right,
right?
right.
Like, so
I knew
that's
exactly what you were
so,
getting at.
and I'm like, because then you're unprepared,
Right.
right? And you can't be unprepared. So, um, so I figured, as you were saying that, like, yeah, that's the other thing. Like, it's like weird, but it
Yeah,
was good.
yeah.
I liked it, if you know what I mean. I enjoyed this just off the cuff conversation.
Appreciate it. Well, it's my pleasure. And even as we sit here laughing, I know I started the story with the arm and things like that, but just like, maybe it's summer, the sun's out and everything like that. But I think from the start of January till now, going into 24, it's like I I just, the smile on my face just continues to grow, and it's like, man, it's good. Like arm
Yep.
broken or like this or that, like man, it's like we had a good week. We dodged weather throughout the week, but like
Yep.
we got to work, we got home safe. Like life is good. Life
Yeah.
is good.
Absolutely. And that's how we should see it. I mean, obviously, not everyone can be as lucky as we are, maybe to
Mhm.
be in a good situation. I'm not saying every
Yeah,
person but if the old saying, every day you wake up is a good day,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So that's how I try to look at it and embrace what I have while I have it.
yeah. I agree with you. Well, we'll leave it there for today, but of course, I'll keep you in mind and just continue this
Please.
conversation going, and it'll be a pleasure to have you on again.
Awesome. Thank you, Asher.
Yes, sir.